Ελπίζω να μ' ακούτε.
Hope you can hear me. I am Mariana Skilakaki, and it's a great pleasure for me to be the moderator of this second to last session. This is on strengthening inter-European cooperation, Extroversion 2030. Let me first thank warmly Mr. Theodoropoulos and Mrs. Kounenaki Efremoglu for their introductory remarks and the speech. And we are today for the discussion in the presence of three speakers that represent in three different ways, but very important ways, the meaning of extroversion and cooperation in practice. We're in the presence of Yanis Manatis, member of the European Parliament, Vice President of the S&D Group, former Minister of Environment, Energy and Climate Change. He is joining us online. I guess he will be shortly. Theodoros Trifon is here, co-CEO Elpen Group, President of the Pan-Hellenic Association of Pharmaceutical Industries and a member of the BOD of the Hellenic Federation of Enterprises, OSEV, and Alexandros Kentigelenis, Professor of Political Economy and Sociology, Bocconi University, and one of the most prominent Hellenic Greeks who are members of academia abroad. Welcome. To set the broader framework, quite often when we talk about Europe, and this is what's being talked about quite a lot today, there are complaints about the lack of speed, red tape, delays in decision making. This is a criticism definitely to an extent quite well justified, but I think we insist on it instead of focusing on the fact that. Hello, Mr. Maniatis. Thank you for joining. We can see you. Can't hear you though. Can you hear me now? Yes, loud and clear. I was kicking off with my introduction before we give you the floor. So there's a point to the criticism that's been heard about Europe in recent years, but maybe sometimes this criticism forgets or overlooks the important foundations that Europe has built: stability, the shared common currency, the single market, the stability. These are huge competitive advantages that are important to Europe. So this is the real question, and this is my concern and question at the same time to kick off the discussion. The thing is not whether Europe is fast or slow in terms of growth and development, but how can we take advantage of what it offers: innovation, networks, partnerships. Mr. Kenikelenis, you are a member of academia. You're a professor that closely monitors developments. What's your take on the map of European cooperation, intra-European cooperation in the next 10 years? And what do you think will be the parameters that will form and shape the new equilibrium we're trying to forge? Thank you for the question. What is clear at the European level is that there are many dividing lines that keep shifting and changing depending on the policy area. In the fiscal policy, especially when it comes to borrowing from the European Union, we have on one hand the countries that are not really generous, like Germany and the Netherlands, and then on the other hand you have Spain, Italy and France, countries that wish for Europe to move faster. When it comes to state aid, subsidies, on the one hand you have Germany and France that seem to agree. They have got 77% of approved programs and funds through the European Union, and then there is Eastern Europe. The Eastern European countries are rather more skeptical vis-a-vis this whole effort. In the energy sector, there are certain countries that are in favor of the nuclear energy, others are emphasizing more on RES, and so on and so forth. So political scientists would call this or describe this as a differentiated geometry. But then again, the president of the ENE, Mr. Hadjiminas, a while ago spoke about a Europe of many speeds. What used to be a taboo issue nowadays is clearly stated even by Emmanuel Macron, who said that it's okay, it's not a big deal if we have a Europe of multiple speeds. And I think this is what we're headed to. There will be many different speeds and countries who will faster. The countries who are faster will be faster because of various policies. Others will be faster in terms of defense, others might go faster in the energy sector, and so on and so forth. Maybe I should add here that NS proposals really meaningful and have a huge impact on the European level. And I think other speakers have said it before, but you see, it would be interesting to look at them, bearing in mind the Letta and Draghi reports, because they both paint a macroeconomic picture with regard to the outlook of Europe. And Ned's proposal, and yes, this backdrop, I think, give maybe some instruments with a view to making this microeconomic framework happen, or macro framework. I'm talking about fiscal or taxation breaks and incentives, and then doing away with red tape and so on and so forth. And I think we can have a deeper and longer discussion about. Thank you very much, says the moderator. Let us go deeper into energy. Mr. Magnatis, over to you. Given your capacity and your role at the heart of Europe, meaning the European Parliament, what are the initiatives that, according to you, could increase competitiveness in Europe in a way that's compatible with sustainability and energy security? Quite often, there's this dilemma. People can't help but wonder whether we can have growth and sustainability together. Do we have a clear answer to this question? Well, at long last, after almost 2 decades during which Europe was on a one-way track, that was the green growth track, that turned a blind eye to issues such as competitiveness for businesses and social cohesion, and also uh, non-dependency on third parties. At long last, Europe now seems to understand some things which we had understood, some of us that live in the real world. Let's remember one positive thing. We must be proud as of the fact that Europe is playing the leading role in the green transition, meaning this effort to protect our planet from gas emissions. The objectives that the goals that we've set for years now, we will insist making good on. There is a 90% decrease of gas emissions by 2040. That's a goal. And then the decarbonization, full decarbonization by 2050. These goals are still there, but there was a mistake along the way that was made, not just by Europe, but also the Greek government and other governments on the way to or headed to green growth. We failed to grasp that on the one hand. All that's green will not suffice in order to keep societies and economies alike standing. We need what is called in energy units, that is plants that will be working round the clock, and they would either use natural gas or nuclear or coal. There's no such thing as a fourth solution. So we need those fundamental units. And then another thing, we need to understand that Europe possibly felt abhorrence vis-a-vis industrial policies. I can't explain it otherwise. That's why it had totally ignored something that was self-evident. In order for you to go to green growth, you have to be able to build green growth instruments and tools. And we're faced with a tragic crossroads where 99% of PVs in Europe are imported from China, and 60% of the wind farm equipment is also bought from China. So at long last, Europe is awake, and now, albeit belatedly, Europe is trying to build its own industry aimed at building so-called green tools and instruments, and most importantly, we're trying to support the Greek industry, excuse me, the European industry, in order for the energy cost to be slashed, because it's twice or 4 times higher compared to our competition, our competitors in the States, that is. And one last thing that, again, Europe had turned a blind eye to, maybe because it would have a toll on societies. Fossil fuel, let's be clear, we are there. We are currently communicating using our laptops, our smartphones, our devices, digital devices. We are proceeding with telecommunications and teleworking just because some people somewhere around the globe have mined fossil raw material, lithium, cobalt, nickel, copper, rare earths. Europe didn't wish to know about that. That's how we got to the point where we had China over the past 15 years buy all lithium, rare earths, copper mines in Latin America and in Africa. They bought everything, so now Europe is trying to somehow secure its strategic independence. It's trying to no longer be dependent on third countries. This is more or less the landscape against which we're working. And I believe that the effort that the European Commission is currently making is sincere. And the same goes for us, the European Parliament. We're trying sincerely to make amends for what we got wrong in the past. So I'd like to think that over the next 4 to 5 years or 3 to 5 years, we are going to redress a situation to benefit the households which are paying a lot of money for energy, and also this could help the enterprises because by now they all realize that the energy cost is the highest cost and the main reason why they can't be competitive. Allow me to interject or rather say something else. Before I met with you, I met with Dan Jorgensen and Apostolos Tzitzikostas, two commissioners, energy and transport, respectively. We had a discussion about CEF, the Connect Europe facility, CEF. This is the process through which we are going to connect the grids of the member states in terms of transport and energy, and I'm quite optimistic. Let me give you an example. CEF in the energy sector, meaning the connecting of the grids over the past period, got 5.8 billion, and now Mr. Jorgensen, the energy commissioner, said it's going to get 30 billion instead. So you see, at long last, Europe managed to understand the importance and the fact that it needs to focus and invest more heavily in this sector. Thank you very much. I think this is a very interesting reference, and maybe the EU was just intentionally overlooking that, and Mr. Theodoropoulos gave us a typical example. The fact that he talked about the fact that we move production capacities elsewhere, we shut down plants and go to different countries, but they're still mining, there's still an environmental issue. I don't think it's resolved on the global scale. Let me come to you, Mr. Trifon, now. The pharma industry is most probably the most successful example, one of the most successful examples, because we have Greek pharma industries that have a global footprint. What are the main preconditions and prerequisites in order for this extroversion to persist and continue given this new environment we've been talking about? Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you to Ene and Mr. Hadziminas for extending an invitation for me to participate again. I want to share with you the example of the pharma industry for us to understand that what happened over the past 20 years in Europe, unfortunately, has created a number of problems. We have fewer jobs, less competitiveness, there is investment void, and lack of technological upgrades. And I don't know how fast we can reverse all that. The European pharma industry, and there is the Medicines for Europe Association, and I'm a member of the BOD thereof, as we speak, represents European and non-European companies which are catering to 75% of the needs of European patients and insured parties. 20 years ago, we had 1,200 plants in Europe, but over the past 15 years, due to policies, one-third thereof decided to move, mostly in Asia. And about 20 years ago, the European production of locally produced pharma and a big chunk of raw material catered to that, almost 75% of the needs of local patients. It's now catering to the needs of 60% instead. And we've asked a question and we've conducted surveys and we presented our studies to the European Parliament. So here's our question. Was this beneficial to Europe, or maybe was it detrimental when the productive capacities were moved elsewhere, when plants and factories were moved abroad? Because you see, there's public expenses, what we pay as states, the taxpayers are paying more. So now the pharma costs more, production, jobs, investment void, European know-how and expertise. Obviously, all of that dropped, and all of that impacted negatively on the competitiveness of Europe. When it comes to dependence on third parties, during the COVID pandemic, we imported a lot of raw material and pharma. There were many countries during the pandemic that didn't have sufficient amounts of medicines. And also when it comes to social cohesion and deindustrialization, and also in terms of the environmental impact footprint, again, the impact was negative. There's the example of aluminum, for instance, that was mentioned to show that it's not just because of the last 20 years and its respective policies that didn't pay off, and so the results were not the ones that were expected. In the meantime, there's this big void, and nobody knows how to fill in this deficit, which brings us to Greece and the Greek pharma industry. Within this context, we, I think, have something positive. Greek enterprises are 12% of stand for 12% of plants or respective pharma industries in Europe. 50%, 50, of the Greek enterprises, pharma enterprises, count on extroversion. What about the preconditions on the basis of which we can stand the test of time in order for us to expand and broaden our export basis and to have more production and be competitive against the backdrop of this environment that keeps changing and shifting because of the energy costs of technology, of digitalization, and tariffs? First thing I've been meaning to say is this. To begin with, it all what we do as enterprises matters. Mr. Theodoropoulos insists on that. We have to first talk about what we are doing and then ask the state for more. Unfortunately, here in Greece, we have just a handful of big enterprises and we have just even fewer big industries. We don't have the culture to wait for long-term yields. You should expect long-term yields. And normally in industry, you should accept the risks. And then we lack a collective mentality that would foster us to work together. So it's up to us, the business people, to provide the right incentives or get the right incentives to the state and to further increase the size and capabilities of our businesses and to work together. Greek enterprises can and should work together and better with academia and our peers in Europe to eventually become stronger and make stronger assertions and claim more. This is about synergies. So we have to increase our size and work together to be competitive. And of course, there's another thing that's pertinent to the state and how the state will eventually, especially in the field of innovation, will be able to help. And we were really happy to hear Mr. Mitsotakis, the Prime Minister, say publicly that he's going to establish a research ministry. Ministry for Research must be established faster. And then it's also a matter of funds and financing for R&D, for it to be rationally managed, and universities must work on the basis of specific criteria, R&D-wise, for professors who conduct surveys and studies to be competitive enough for them to have a right to be eligible for grants and subsidies and aid, state aid. And then it's also a matter of coupling production with the research community. This is also a necessary prerequisite for the future. Let me not dwell on urban and spatial planning issues, meeting out of justice, and we, all of us, have joined hands and forces, and we agree that steps must be made. We must make leaps and bounds, actually. And we have to take advantage of the data, big data, and digitalization to make the state more effective and efficient. Thank you very much. I think you gave us the framework that discussed the more preconditions and prerequisites for us to take advantage of the advantages that Europe offers to somehow diminish or contain the disadvantages. Now, Mr. Kendikelenis, given this framework, and we heard mention being made of innovation and investments, and we heard mention being made about steadfastness and stability in a framework that's fixed and it's not going to change all the time. In other places around the globe, for instance, in the States, the Trump administration, as we speak, there's a certain trend. They tend to move fast, maybe in a chaotic manner, and there is some cost in terms of institutional continuity and stability. Now, given these fast changes, can, in your opinion, Europe take advantage if it acts as an island of reliability and credibility, or in this chaotic environment, or is it doomed to stay behind because it doesn't have fast reflexes?
To a certain extent, the added value of Europe is precisely that there is predictability, or there is this regulatory role of the European Union. There used to be the regulatory framework for AI, the environmental factors, the GDPR, uh, personal data, etc. So there is this role. Now, with regard to the question as to whether Europe is condemned, well, my own answer is that it's not condemned at all. And I can give you two arguments. One is a historic one. Now, if we check what happened in the 70s and 80s, everyone had written Europe off. I mean, this was the period of the sclerotic Europe. All analysts had started not to take into account, believing that they wouldn't be able to have an active economy, and it would slowly fade in without. So the answer to that was the single market program, and within this framework, Jacques Delors, leading the European Commission, was played a catalyst part, because it was him with the 1982 project who put pressure in order to deepen the single market and have the GDP changes. So as Delors himself was saying, no one can love a single market. So as Europe, we need to have a selling point that has to do with a social cohesion that Mr. Trifon mentioned. It has to do with competitiveness, innovation, etc. So all this, to bring it up to date, all these are things that Europe starts to recognize. And it is within this framework that we can examine the statement of J.D. Vance in Munich a few months ago, who actually waged an attack against Europe, and it's important to see how other EU member countries reacted. Speaking about deepening this European cooperation, this is important. And I will conclude with that. Something that we've failed to discuss, and maybe we don't face it as a major political issue in Greece, is the rise of Euroscepticism political parties. There's a high likelihood in France and in Germany to have these political parties win the elections. Yes, well, it's always interesting to see how this Euroscepticism is expressed, because criticism is a positive thing. Of course, there are many different views. Now, Mr. Magnatis, earlier, you talked about the strategic independence and autonomy. This was a lesson we got throughout the pandemic, the energy transition, and the acceleration of technology. We now know that we cannot rely on other markets, and we need to have independence and autonomy in strategic sectors. So do you believe that Europe moves fast towards this objective, and what could be the part of countries such as Greece in this transition? Allow me to make two remarks that are a bit contradictory, but this is a reality. Well, there is a serious issue with the governments of the member states. If we want to examine and consider why Europe is actually inexistent vis-à-vis digital technology, and all large platforms and major platforms are from the US or China, we'll find out that simply there is no scale of investment, no intention to have European agglomerations compete against Amazon, Google, or Microsoft, etc. We are still failing to move fast enough. This is not the fault of the Commission. This has to do with the responsibilities of national governments. Each one of them looks after their own. So, vis-à-vis digital transformation issues and defense issues, that is the other large chapter that has been opened, and where we are going to see investments of approximately 800 billion euros in the coming years. Well, if we keep up with that, we won't have any positive outcome. So we need to realize that we need to unite and join forces, and this has to be understood by all prime ministers. I'm referring to prime ministers and leaders of the 27 member states. Now, there's a second issue. I don't know how we're going to overcome this. Nowadays, there is a serious issue with leadership, lack of leadership, and lack of vision in Europe. The European Commission, unfortunately, has nothing to do with the visionary commissions at the era of Jacques Delors, or even to remind you of the very recent commissioner under the committee under Juncker. We have 3 reports. We have Mario Draghi's report, Enrico Letta's report, and Lindström's report. So if these are followed by the Commission and the Member States, etc., we'll soon find a way out. Now, to conclude with regard to Greece. Greece has been endowed by geography and nature with a very interesting geographic and geopolitical position. Allow me to say, 30 or 40 years ago, the LNG issue, liquefied natural gas, etc., to solve our energy issues, had been envisioned by Sakis Peponis under the government of Andreas Papandreou. I'm referring to decades ago when we built up Revithousa, when Germans only discovered LNG in 2023. Therefore, Greece, together with its geography, has taken serious steps for quite some time now in order to achieve its autonomy and energy independence and to become an energy hub. Let me also remind you that for the past 10 years, back in 2013, we caught the TAP pipeline. We have funded the Alexandroupolis FSRU. I had the honor to be signatory of these projects back in December 2014. Why am I saying all this? Because we, as Greece, of course, it's always under the responsibility of the government, but it is the responsibility of the political system overall. Vis-à-vis energy issues that have a long-lasting effect for decades, they need to have reached an agreement on some self-evident issues. I believe that it was absolutely wrong for us to totally ignore natural gas reserves. We have ExxonMobil drilling, Chevron. Ursula von der Leyen goes to Aliyev, the president of Azerbaijan, asking him to give us LNG. The Americans are there, the Qatarians are there. So had we moved in the previous decade, today Greece would be exporting natural gas, and we would have much, much cheaper energy, power for our businesses and our households, and much better processes for our geopolitical upgrading. Since if we're feeding LNG to the rest of the European capitals, they need us most. So we are standing here today. We have the advantage of our geographical position of the previous decades, acting with wisdom and a long-term vision. And if we manage to avoid mistakes for the upcoming 5 to 10 years, I think that we will be able to have an optimistic future, both for Greek businesses as well as for the other generations.
Thank you very much. It's always interesting to take a look at the past to see what they can change, to not skip or miss out on opportunities today. The big opportunity today is certainly technological acceleration and AI. I think throughout the day today, everybody saw this as an opportunity for Greece and Europe. And certainly this is part and parcel of the reports that you mentioned. I have one last question for you. If we look at 2030 or with our horizon 2030, what is the next big wager for the industrial sector, for pharma industries in particular? Is the big wager cooperation between universities and startups, innovation, taking advantage of AI, and how can we win this wager? I believe it's all of these together, and they have been both theoretically and practically described. There are also tangible actions happening. To begin with, the Greek pharma industry, and generally speaking, Greek enterprises, have to fill in the big investment gap which was created back between 2010 and 2019, and this is something that's still there, unfortunately. And if we look at what happened with the rest of Europe and our competitors in other countries and continents, I think it's important you realize this is a big issue. And therefore, when it comes to the question of how we can be competitive in order to have a bright outlook for the future, that has everything to do with what I said before: synergies, cooperations, partnerships, the size of enterprises, and also embedding technologies matters. To me, what also matters is education and training, and embedding the shrinking productive capacity and human resources in our country. You can start at the school. We definitely have to have more STEM taught at schools throughout the education system, and it's also important for universities. And this is also something that we, productive entities, are responsible for, and industrial facilities are responsible for. We have to connect teaching and education with production. We also, for ourselves, have training programs, and we train students, especially in Eastern Attica and Tripolis, because we have facilities there. We train young professionals, we train young people to facilitate eventually their working for us. And now, innovation is important, technology is important. AI has ushered in a revolution in our industry when it comes to devices, forecasts, diagnosis, coming up with new meds, proceeding with research for innovative medication, but also things. What is positive for Greece is the fact that over the past few years we've had a better ecosystem of startups than before. We see that we see that ελληνική παραγωγή, we see that EOVER. There's a handful of spin-offs, but still they are happening. They are coming from the universities. They're connecting with the business life. And despite that, we're reaching the end of the RRF. When it comes to innovation as such, there are still funds that's coming through the European Union. The European Investment Fund, EIF, has called the tender, and there will be 200 million leverage thanks to private investors. And that money will help create a healthcare investment ecosystem. And this is important. It's going to provide new impetus for the years to come. And so we're going to have more enterprises and businesses come from abroad. They're going to open up their branches or subsidiaries in Greece. And the life science of the Latin America school is very strong. I see it and I've seen it. It's becoming more dynamic in recent years. They're interested in transferring know-how and expertise in research in Greece. All of that is creating the right framework. Obviously, we are optimistic. And that's why we have an investment program that is worth 300 million in research and development. But I also think that in order for all of that to work, we as entities and as state, we have to go even faster. And we definitely have to take better advantage of opportunities that Europe offers, because there are more opportunities there. And I think this is a positive note to conclude on. The right preconditions are there. A lot can be done on the part of entities, individual entities, business entities, the state, in order to achieve this ambitious goal. Thank you very much.